After 25 years of building his empire from behind the scenes, my husband told me he regretted marrying me. He called me the boring foundation, and said his young new mistress was the penthouse. He thought he could just discard me and keep the company I built. He forgot that when the foundation decides to crack, the whole penthouse comes crumbling down. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know, I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Michelle Rhodes, and for 25 years, I was the silent architect of my husband's success. While my 50-year-old husband Darnell Rhodes was the charismatic frontman of Rhodes Construction, the one with the booming laugh and the firm handshake that closed deals, I was the one behind the scenes, ensuring the empire didn't crumble before he had a chance to build it. At 48, I was the master of logistics, the queen of spreadsheets, the woman who could turn a complex blueprint into a flawlessly executed project on time and under budget. He was the face, I was the foundation. It was a partnership that had made us wealthy, respected, and I had thought until recently happy. Our 25th anniversary party was supposed to be a testament to that partnership. We hosted it at our home, a sprawling custom-built mansion that was, in itself, the greatest advertisement for our company. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite, developers, politicians, bankers, all the people Darnell loved to impress. I moved through the crowd with a quiet confidence, my simple, elegant dress a stark contrast to the flashier gowns of the other wives. I preferred substance over style, a philosophy that had served our business well, even if my husband seemed to be forgetting it. Darnell was holding court by the grand stone fireplace, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand, his laughter a little too loud. And at his side, as she always seemed to be lately, was Anyas Thorne. 28 years old, with the ambition of a starving wolf and a body that defied gravity, Anyas was Darnell's newest protégé, his special projects coordinator. I knew what she was. The entire city knew what she was. She was my husband's midlife crisis. A cliché so painfully obvious it was almost insulting. 4 months I had watched their mentorship with a growing sense of dread. The late-night strategy sessions, the business trips for two, the way his eyes would follow her across a room. I had endured it with a quiet, simmering dignity, telling myself it was a phase, a foolish old man's last grasp at youth, something that would pass. I had invested too much, built too much, to let our empire be fractured by such a predictable folly. But tonight something was different. There was a new, reckless confidence in Darnell's eyes, a triumphant gleam that made me uneasy. He and Anyas were a unit, a magnetic center of attention, while I felt like a ghost, a polite hostess haunting the edges of my own celebration. The breaking point came late in the evening after most of the guests had departed. I found Darnell and Anyas on the terrace, sharing a laugh under the moonlight, the city lights twinkling below them like a carpet of fallen stars. "It was a wonderful party, darling," I said, my voice carefully neutral as I approached. "I believe our guests were suitably impressed." Anyas gave me a slow, condescending smile. "Oh, Michelle," she purred, her hand resting possessively on Darnell's arm. "It was magnificent. Darnell is just so brilliant. Everything he touches turns to gold." Darnell beamed at her, then turned to me, his expression hardening slightly, as if my presence were an unwelcome intrusion on their private moment. "Anyas is right, Michelle," he said. "It's time we were honest about things." I felt a cold knot of dread form in my stomach. Honest about what, Darnell? He took a deep breath, puffing out his chest, a man about to deliver a pronouncement he believed was both profound and undeniable. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, his voice taking on a tone of deep, false sincerity. "About my life. About my journey. About what I want for my future. And the truth is, I regret marrying you." The words, so casual, so cruel, hung in the night air, sucking the very oxygen from my lungs. Nearly 3 decades of a shared existence, 25 years of which were spent in marriage. A business built from nothing. All dismissed with a single devastating sentence. I stared at him, speechless. Anyas' smirk widened. "Don't get me wrong," he continued, as if that could soften the blow. "You've been useful. A good partner in a practical sense. You kept the books, you managed the logistics. You were a wonderful foundation. But a foundation, my dear, is meant to be built upon. It's not the penthouse." Anya here, she's the penthouse. She understands the view from the top. She's not afraid of the future, of fun, of living. He looked at me then, his eyes full of a pity that was more insulting than any rage. You, Michelle, you've become safe. Boring. You are the woman I needed to build my empire. But you are not the woman I need to enjoy it. I looked at my husband, this stranger who wore his face, and then at the young smug woman clinging to his arm. I saw my future laid out before me, a future where I was to be the discarded, practical first wife, the boring foundation upon which he would build his new, exciting life with her. A lifetime of love, of partnership, of shared dreams, all invalidated in a single cruel moment. My heart, which had endured so much, finally, irrevocably broke. But in the cracks of that broken heart, something else began to form. Not despair, but a cold, quiet, and utterly ferocious fury. He thought I was just the foundation. He thought I was just the woman who kept the books. He had no idea. He, in his arrogant delusion, had forgotten that the foundation is the most important part of any structure. And if you try to rip it out, the entire glittering, beautiful penthouse comes crashing down. He had just declared our marriage a regret. I, Michelle Rhodes, was about to make sure his divorce would be the greatest regret of his entire life. The morning after my anniversary, the morning after my life was so casually and cruelly dismantled, I did not weep. I did not rage. I woke before dawn, went to my home office, the true command center of Rhodes Construction, and I began to work. The initial searing pain of Darnell's betrayal had cooled overnight into a sharp, crystalline focus. He had called me the foundation, a useful but boring necessity he now wished to discard. He was about to learn that the foundation holds all the keys, supports all the weight, and, if it so chooses, can orchestrate a controlled demolition. Darnell, I was sure, expected me to crumble. He likely envisioned a scene of tearful recriminations, of me begging for him to reconsider, of a messy emotional battle he could easily win with his blustering charm and Anya's youthful reinforcement. He was not prepared for the quiet, methodical efficiency with which I began to protect my life's work. I spent the morning making copies of every contract I had ever negotiated, every financial statement I had ever prepared, every blueprint I had ever personally reviewed and approved. I created a digital archive, a fortress of data that methodically represented every contribution from my quarter-century of usefulness. He finally emerged around noon, looking refreshed, triumphant, a man who believed he had just successfully jettisoned a lifetime of dead weight. He found me in the office, surrounded by files. "Ah, Michelle," he said with a magnanimous smile, as if speaking to a departing employee. "Good. You're being practical. I knew you would." He placed a thick envelope on my desk. "My lawyer drew these up. A very generous settlement agreement, I think you'll find. It gives you the condo in the city, a small allowance for a few years. More than enough for a woman of your simple needs to live comfortably." I looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "And the business, Darnell?" I asked, my voice even. "Rhodes Construction? The company we built together." He laughed, a sound of genuine, dismissive amusement. "My dear, you didn't really think. That's my company. My name on the door. You kept the books, yes, and you were very good at it. But I was the visionary, the one who brought in the deals. You were an employee, Michelle. A very well-compensated one, I might add. But an employee nonetheless. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. He was trying to erase me, to rewrite our entire shared history, reducing my role as a founding partner to that of a glorified bookkeeper. The foundation to him was just paid labor." "I see," I said softly. "And the house. This house. The one whose every detail, from the structural engineering to the Italian marble in the foyer, I personally oversaw. The house," he said, his smile tightening slightly, "will be my primary residence. With Anya, of course. We'll need it for entertaining. But don't worry," he added, a final, patronizing pat on my metaphorical head. "I'll give you a full month to move your things out of the guest wing." He truly believed he held all the power. He believed that his pronouncements were now law. He thought the divorce would be a simple, clean amputation, with him keeping the healthy, vital body of the business and our life, and me left with a small, neatly severed limb. I let him believe it. For now. "I'll have my lawyer review the agreement, Darnell," I said, my voice a model of subdued compliance. He beamed, his confidence restored. "Excellent. I knew you'd be reasonable." He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Michelle? Anya will be by later with her decorator. They'll be starting on the West Wing first. I trust you'll make them feel welcome. The takeover, as I had come to call it in my mind, was beginning. For the next 2 weeks, I was a quiet observer in my own home, a ghost at the feast of their new life. I watched as Anya and her decorator swept through the rooms, pointing at my cherished furniture, my carefully chosen art, with dismissive gestures. All of this has to go, she'd say. So heavy. So dated. They spoke of knocking down walls, of opening up the space, their words of violent assault on the life I had so meticulously built. Darnell, meanwhile, was at the office systematically trying to lock me out. I'd get notifications of my password being changed on the company servers, of my access to financial portals being revoked. He was clumsy about it, arrogant. He didn't realize that I had built that system, that I had backdoors and administrative privileges he didn't even know existed. Every night after he had gone to his new master bedroom with Anya, I would log back in silently, invisibly, and download the day's records, a quiet digital spy documenting his every move, his every attempt to erase me. He was so consumed with his new life, so confident in my defeat, that he grew careless. He started using the company credit card for lavish dinners with Anya, for designer clothes for her, for a weekend trip to a vineyard, all brazenly logged under client development. He was creating a paper trail of his own malfeasance, a trail I was meticulously preserving. My initial heartbreak, the raw, gaping wound of his betrayal, was being cauterized by a cold, righteous fury. He hadn't just left me, he was trying to rob me, to strip me of my contribution, my history, my very identity as his partner. He called me boring. He called me safe. He called me the foundation. He had no idea how much power the foundation truly holds. He had no idea that while he was busy redecorating the penthouse, I was quietly, methodically planting charges at the base of every pillar that held his entire world up. The demolition was coming, and it would be spectacular. The 2 weeks I spent as a ghost in my own home were the most productive of my life. While Darnell and Anya were busy planning their new, glittering future on the ruins of my past, I was engaged in a quiet, meticulous, and deeply satisfying act of archaeological excavation. I was digging through the bedrock of our shared life, the financial records of Rhodes construction, and unearthing a treasure trove of Darnell's deceit. My home office, the one Darnell had always dismissed as my boring paperwork den, became my command center. He had changed the password to the main company server, a clumsy, arrogant move. He failed to remember that I was the one who had set up the entire network a decade ago, including a private administrative-level cloud backup that he had never known existed. Every night, long after the house had fallen silent, while he and Anya slept in my marital bed, I would sit at my desk, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face, and I would conduct my quiet audit. It was a painful process, each transaction a small, fresh betrayal. But my training, my 48 years of methodical, analytical thinking took over. The heartbroken wife receded, and the forensic accountant emerged. I worked with a cold, dispassionate fury, my pen flying across legal pads, my fingers dancing on the keyboard, creating spreadsheets, cross-referencing dates, highlighting discrepancies. Darnell's arrogance had made him sloppy. He truly believed I was just a bookkeeper, someone who saw the numbers but didn't understand the story they told. He was wrong. I understood the story perfectly. And it was a sordid tale of embezzlement, of marital waste, of a fool building a fantasy on a foundation of lies. I started with Anya's employment. She was on the payroll as a special projects coordinator, with a salary that was higher than that of our most experienced site foreman, a man with 30 years of construction experience. Her projects, I discovered, consisted of accompanying Darnell on client dinners at the city's most expensive restaurants, research, trips to luxury resorts, and sourcing new decor for the office, which seemed to consist primarily of purchases from high-end designer boutiques. I meticulously downloaded every expense report she had ever filed, each one a testament to her parasitic existence, each one approved with Darnell's arrogant, looping signature. Then I moved on to the company credit cards, the ones Darnell used for business development. The statements were a roadmap of his affair. The charges read like a society gossip column. A weekend at a 5-star hotel in wine country, a $5,000 charge at a jewelry store on the day of Anya's birthday, a series of suspiciously large payments to a high-end floral delivery service. He had disguised it all as client entertainment and corporate gifting. But I had the dates, I had the locations, and thanks to Anya's own boastful social media presence, I had the photographic evidence of her wearing the very jewelry, sipping the very champagne that our company had paid for. The deeper I dug, the more I found. He had used company funds to pay for the lease on his new sports car. He had created a consulting company under a false name, a company whose sole purpose seemed to be to bill Rhodes Construction for vague, unsubstantiated services, the payments going directly into an account only he controlled. This wasn't just marital waste. This was outright fraud. This was theft from me, from the company we had built together, from our shared legacy. With each new discovery, my resolve hardened. This was no longer just about a divorce, about dividing assets. This was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, about exposing the truth of the man I had been married to for 25 years. He hadn't just left me, he had been systematically robbing me in plain sight, all while calling me his practical, useful partner. After 2 weeks of relentless late-night work, I had it. A dossier. A thick, meticulously organized binder filled with spreadsheets, highlighted bank statements, damning credit card receipts, and printouts of Anya's social media posts, each one time-stamped to correspond with a fraudulent business expense. I had created a complete, undeniable narrative of his deceit, a story told in the cold, hard language of numbers, a language I was fluent in, a language he had so foolishly assumed I had forgotten. I looked at the binder sitting on my desk, at the years of my hard work and his casual, cruel betrayal, all distilled into this single powerful weapon. My heart ached for the man I had once loved, for the life we had built. But that man was gone, and that life was a lie. What remained was this: a legal battle to be fought, a legacy to be protected, and a boring, safe foundation that was about to show everyone just how much power it held. My quiet audit was complete. It was time to hire a shark. It was time to go to war. The day I walked into Diane Warren's office, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I was no longer a grieving wife, a victim of my husband's midlife crisis. I was a plaintiff, a businesswoman armed with a meticulously prepared dossier of evidence, about to engage the most formidable legal mind in the city. The law firm of Warren, Finch & Associates was legendary. They were known for handling the city's most contentious, high-stakes divorces, for dismantling arrogant, powerful men with a surgical, almost gleeful precision. Diane Warren herself was a legend, a woman my age who had built her own empire on a foundation of sharp intellect and an unwillingness to suffer fools. She was, as my old friend Janice had once told me, a shark. And I was about to point her directly at my husband. I had made the appointment under my maiden name, a small act of reclamation. I walked into her sleek top-floor office, the thick binder of my research clutched in my hands, and felt not intimidation but a sense of coming home. This world of facts, of evidence, of strategy, this was a world I understood. Ms. Warren greeted me not with pity, but with a look of sharp, professional assessment. "Mrs. Rhodes," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her large glass desk. "Please sit. You said on the phone you have a complex marital situation." "Complex is one word for it," I replied, my voice steady. I placed the binder on her desk with a satisfying thud. "But I believe fraudulent is another." I spent the next hour walking her through my findings, my voice calm, clinical, the voice of the claims adjuster I once might have been. I showed her the spreadsheets, the highlighted credit card statements, the flow charts I had created to trace the money from our business accounts to Anya Thorne's lavish lifestyle. I showed her the timeline, the way the spending had escalated as Darnell's arrogance grew, as my own presence in his life was systematically minimized. She listened intently, her intelligent eyes scanning the documents, her expression transitioning from professional interest to a sort of quiet, admiring disbelief. She would occasionally stop me, asking a sharp, pertinent question, her mind clearly connecting the dots, seeing the patterns I had so carefully laid out. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. "Mrs. Rhodes," she said, her voice a low, appreciative murmur. "This is not a dossier. This is a conviction. You have done 90% of my work for me. Your husband, he is not just an adulterer. He's a fool. A supremely arrogant and remarkably sloppy fool." A wave of validation so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. "So," I asked, "you believe I have a case?" A case. She let out a short, sharp laugh. My dear woman, you have a checkmate. He thinks he can just discard you, the foundation, and keep the penthouse? We are going to prove that without the foundation the entire structure collapses. We are going to prove that you are Rhodes Construction. She outlined her strategy, and it was beautiful in its brutal simplicity. We file for divorce immediately, she began. Citing adultery, of course. But that's just the appetizer. The main course is the suit for fraudulent dissipation of marital assets. We will petition the court for an immediate freeze on all his accounts, both personal and business, to prevent him from hiding anything else. We will subpoena Anya Thorne. We will depose every single employee at that restaurant who has had to witness his client development dinners with her. She looked at me, her eyes blazing with a joyful, combative light. We will not be asking for half, Mrs. Rhodes. We will be arguing that due to his gross financial misconduct and his breach of fiduciary duty to the company you both built, you are entitled to a significantly unequal distribution of assets in your favor. We will argue that he has proven himself incompetent to manage the business. We will fight for you to gain controlling interest, if not sole ownership, of the entire company. Sole ownership. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The company without Darnell? It was almost unimaginable. But the alternative, allowing him to continue to run it into the ground while he and Anya laughed all the way to the bank, was even more so. He will fight, of course, she warned. He will be vicious. He will try to paint you as a bitter, vengeful shrew. Are you prepared for that? I thought of Darnell's face when he had told me he regretted marrying me. I thought of Anya's smug smile. I thought of my 25 years of usefulness. Ms. Warren, I said, my voice as cold and as steady as her own, I have been underestimated my entire life. I am very much prepared for him to do it one last time. She smiled again, a true warrior's smile. Excellent, Mrs. Rhodes. Then let's get to work. Let's show Mr. Rhodes what the foundation can do when it decides to rise up. I left her office that day feeling like a new woman. The heartbroken wife had been left behind. In her place was a client, a plaintiff, a quiet architect of justice. Darnell thought he was divorcing a boring, safe old woman. He had no idea he was about to go to war with Michelle Rhodes, a woman who had all the receipts, and who had just hired the biggest shark in the city to make sure he paid every single one of them. The game was on. The legal battle began not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating barrage of paperwork. The divorce petition, the lawsuit for fraudulent dissipation of assets, and the emergency motion to freeze his accounts were all served to Darnell simultaneously at his office, an act of legal theater orchestrated by Diane Warren for maximum impact. I heard through the office grapevine that his roar of fury had been heard down the entire executive hallway. His world of easy money and unquestioned authority had just come to a screeching, lawyer-sanctioned halt. His initial response was predictable, blustering denial and arrogant counterthreats from his own high-priced legal team. They tried to portray me as a hysterical, vengeful woman, incompetent in business, trying to destroy a great man out of spite. But their arguments were built on sand, and Diane, my lawyer, was a tidal wave of meticulously documented fact. The depositions were the turning point, the place where Darnell's arrogant narrative collided with the hard, unforgiving wall of reality. I attended his deposition, sitting silently beside Diane, my face a calm, unreadable mask. I wanted to see him, to watch him squirm under the weight of his own lies. He strode in, full of a false confidence, his expensive suit a shield against the truth. He began by painting a picture of himself as the visionary, the rainmaker, the sole architect of Rhodes Construction's success. And your wife, Mrs. Rhodes? Diane asked, her voice deceptively gentle. What was her role in the company you built? Darnell scoffed. Michelle? She was a wonderful support. Handled the bookkeeping, the payroll. A glorified office manager, really. Very organized. But the vision, the deals, the growth. That was all me. Diane nodded slowly, then slid a thick binder across the table. Exhibit A, Mr. Rhodes. A detailed analysis of every major contract Rhodes Construction has won since 1998. Curiously, your signature appears on only 6 of them. Mrs. Rhodes's signature as lead negotiator and signatory appears on over 200. Can you explain that discrepancy for the court? The color drained from Darnell's face. He stammered, well, she She handled the final paperwork. It was a matter of delegation. I see, Diane said coolly. Delegating the most crucial part of the business. How very visionary of you. She continued, her questions relentless, precise. She presented the evidence of his lavish spending on the company credit cards. Mr. Rhodes, can you explain this charge for $5,000 at a Tiffany & Company in Aspen, listed under client gifts? I was entertaining a potential investor, he lied, sweat beading on his upper lip. Were you indeed? Diane said, sliding a photograph across the table. It was a printout from Anya Thorne's own social media page, showing her preening in a hotel room in Aspen on that very date, wearing a brand new, very expensive-looking diamond necklace, the iconic blue box sitting on the table beside her. The caption read, "My baby knows how to treat me. #best boyfriend ever." Darnell stared at the photo, his jaw slack. He had been caught so easily, so utterly, by his own foolish arrogance and his mistress's vanity. One by one, Diane dismantled his lies. The business trips that were romantic getaways. The client dinners that were intimate meals for two. The consulting fees paid to a shell company that funneled money directly into Anya's bank account. It was a brutal, systematic vivisection of his deceitful life, all laid bare under the cold, fluorescent lights of the deposition room. Anya Thorne's deposition was even more pathetic. Stripped of Darnell's financial support and facing the formidable Ms. Warren, her usual smug confidence dissolved into a tearful, whining performance. She couldn't explain her job duties. She couldn't justify her salary. Under oath, she was forced to admit that her work for the company consisted primarily of providing emotional support to its CEO. "So you were his mistress," Diane stated, her voice flat. "I was his partner." Anya cried. "A partner in what exactly, Miss Thorne?" Diane pressed. "In spending his wife's money?" Anya had no answer. My own deposition was quiet, dignified. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to cry. I simply presented the facts. I walked them through my years of managing the company's finances, of nurturing client relationships, of ensuring projects came in on budget while Darnell was out entertaining. I presented my own separate financial records, showing my personal investments, my own quiet, prudent management of the funds he had always dismissed as my little hobby. I told them about the night of our anniversary, about his cruel dismissal of our entire marriage. He told me, I said, my voice steady, my gaze fixed on my own hands, that I was the foundation, that I was useful for building the empire but not for enjoying it. I looked up then, my eyes meeting Darnell's across the table. He was right about one thing. I was the foundation. And he is about to find out what happens when the foundation decides to reclaim the building. By the end of the depositions, the battle was all but over. Darnell's case, built on a mountain of lies and arrogance, had been reduced to rubble. His lawyer, I heard later, had advised him to settle, and to settle quickly before more of his sordid affairs and fraudulent dealings were entered into the public court record. He had wanted a divorce, a quick and easy severing that would leave him with the spoils of our life's work. Instead, he had been subjected to a legal and financial colonoscopy, his every lie, his every betrayal, his every pathetic deception exposed for the world to see. He had said he regretted marrying me. I was beginning to think he was finally starting to understand the true meaning of regret. The final settlement meeting was not held in a grand courtroom, but in the quiet, intimidatingly elegant conference room of Diane Warren's law firm. There was no judge, no jury, just the cold, hard reality of the numbers on the table. Darnell, my husband of 25 years, sat opposite me, looking like a man who had aged a decade in the past few months. His expensive suit seemed to hang on him, his usual confident swagger replaced by a weary, defeated slump. Anya was not there. I had heard she had vanished at the first sign of real legal trouble, her loyalty as fleeting as the money she had so eagerly spent. Darnell was alone. Diane My Lawyer was a vision of cool, professional power. She laid out the final terms of the settlement, her voice crisp, uncompromising. It was not a negotiation. It was a surrender. Given the overwhelming evidence of Mr. Rhodes's fraudulent dissipation of marital assets and his breach of fiduciary duty to Rhodes Construction, she began, my client, Mrs. Michelle Rhodes, is entitled to a significantly unequal distribution of the marital estate. She slid a document across the table. As per this agreement, Rhodes Construction, its assets, its contracts and its liabilities, will be valued by an independent forensic accountant. Mrs. Rhodes, as the demonstrable architect of its financial stability and operational success, will be awarded a 65% controlling interest in the company. I saw Darnell flinch, a sharp, involuntary jerk. 65%. I would be his boss. The foundation would now own the penthouse. Furthermore, Diane continued, her voice relentless, all funds determined to have been fraudulently funneled to Miss Anya Thorne or her associated shell companies will be credited against Mr. Rhodes's remaining 35% share. In short, Mr. Rhodes, you will be paying your wife back for your affair. His face was ashen. He had thought he could just walk away, leaving me with a small condo and a pittance. Instead, he was about to become a minority shareholder in a company he no longer controlled, his share likely to be wiped out by the debts he himself had accrued. The marital home, Diane went on, will be sold. The proceeds will be divided according to the same 65/35 split, after Mrs. Rhodes is reimbursed for her initial down payment from her own premarital assets. It was a total, comprehensive victory. I had not just gotten my half, I had gotten justice. I had reclaimed my life's work, my financial security, my dignity. Darnell, his voice a hoarse whisper, finally spoke. This is everything, Michelle. You're taking everything. I looked at him, then really looked at him for the first time in what felt like an eternity. I saw not the monster who had betrayed me, not the arrogant tycoon, but a small, pathetic, frightened man, stripped of his illusions, his power, his manufactured identity. And I felt, not triumph, not hatred, but a profound, weary sadness. No, Darnell, I said softly, my voice holding no malice, only the quiet weight of truth. You're wrong. I'm not taking everything. I'm just taking back what was mine. The part one built. The part you took for granted. I paused, letting my words sink in. You had a partner, a true partner, for 25 years. You had a woman who worked tirelessly by your side, who celebrated your successes as her own. You had a foundation of love and loyalty that was stronger than any concrete you ever poured. That was everything, Darnell. And you threw it away for something cheap and fleeting. I stood up, my part in this sordid affair finally over. I don't regret the years I spent building our company, I said, my gaze steady. My only regret is that I built it with a man who failed to understand its true value. I left him there with the papers, with the ruins of his life. The aftermath was exactly as Diane had predicted. The settlement was signed. I took control of Rhodes Construction, rebranding it as Rhodes and Associates, a subtle but significant change. I promoted my most loyal and competent project managers, people Darnell had often overlooked. And I began the slow, satisfying work of rebuilding the company on a foundation of integrity and respect. Darnell, with his diminished share and his tarnished reputation, eventually resigned. He couldn't bear to work for me, the boring foundation he had so arrogantly dismissed. The last I heard, he was living in a small rental, struggling to find new investors for some vague new venture. His penthouse life was over. My own life, however, had just begun. I didn't need a new man, a new flashy lifestyle. I had my work, my integrity, my self-respect. I had rediscovered the strong, intelligent, capable woman who had been there all along, the architect of her own success. He had said he regretted marrying me. As I stood in the boardroom of my company, looking out at the city skyline I had helped to build, I knew with an unshakable certainty that the one thing Darnell Rhodes now regretted more than anything else in his entire foolish life was the day he so arrogantly, so stupidly decided to divorce me. And that, I realized, was a victory far more satisfying than any amount of money.